this question of meaning is an interesting question. And if science tells us that there's no objective meaning to the universe, no purpose or meaning, does that make our lives purposeless and meaningless? Absolutely not. Quite the contrary. It means the purpose and meaning in our lives is what we make. It makes what we do more important.
What if they wanted to do something immoral? What if they wanted to inflict self-harm? Well, what if that's the meaning and the purpose that they ascribe to themselves? Would be a monster not to say, no, that is not your meaning and your purpose, but hold on. You just told him that's the only thing that makes sense on your worldview, is that he has his own subjective knockoff of objective purpose and meaning. Well, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here, and today we're going to be talking about science, religion, and Lawrence Krauss. I hope that you'll stay with us the whole time, and if you're new to the channel, we have a lot more like this, so I hope that you'll click that subscribe button and turn on the notifications link if you like listening to breakdowns on topics like this and related to this with Christians and atheists. So Lawrence Krauss is well known in the atheist community and has created a lot of the talking points that have made it into the lexicon of the YouTube atheist Bible, if there were such a thing. I mean, I hear his comments quite often, and he may have chops when it comes to science, but when it comes to making philosophical statements, often he's out of his depth, particularly when it's the philosophy of religion. So we're going to take a look at some of what he has to say. Now, despite that he often says that, or is on record at least once, I've heard him say that he doesn't like to give the same speech more than once, he does use a lot of the same little anecdotes or little nuggets of Kraussism, and so we're going to go through some of the most popular today, and we're going to take a look at it and see if they hold any water from a Christian perspective and see what a Christian has to say in response to them. So this is from the World Economic Forum of 2013, and let's just jump right in and hear what Krauss has to say.
Of course religion is outdated in the 21st century. Most religious people, to respond, it's true that you may get many people saying they're religious, but none of them, in the first world at least, in the developed world, to first approximation, actually believe the doctrines of their faith. They like to be religious. They want to believe, to use something from the X-Files. They want to believe in believing. So that Catholics don't really believe that when a priest holds a wafer, it turns into the body of Christ. No one really believes that nonsense. I have, in the last week, spent more time talking to Jewish atheists than I can count. Most of the Jews I know are atheists, and they say it's perfectly reasonable to be Jewish atheists because there's other aspects of the Jewish religion they like. So the point is that the doctrines of religion are outdated, and that's for good reason. They were.
Okay, first of all, nobody really believes this stuff in the first world. Well, you're looking at someone who believes it from the first world. I can't speak for Catholic beliefs, although that makes me wonder, has Lawrence Krauss talked to that many Catholics? Because I talk to them and I don't get that vibe. Now, as he kind of says with the nominal Jews that he speaks to or whatever, you know, there are nominal Christians, and we're very aware of them, people that come to church, or maybe there's some level of intellectual assent to Christian doctrine, but they don't actually really walk with Jesus or live out this faith. You know, these are the Christmas and Easter type of Christians. Yeah, sure, those people are out there, nominal Christians, gotcha. But to say that no one actually believes this, how in the world is it that this same Lawrence Krauss, and I don't know if we'll get it in these clips, but so often says, you realize that a huge chunk of the country doesn't believe in biological evolution, and they believe it because of their faith or whatever. You know, okay, well, do they believe it or do they not believe it, Krauss? Which is it? I mean, a lot of times what you get, I think, from skeptics like this is, on the one hand, you get comments that make sense when you're making a particular point, but we're kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth. As we're going to see here in a little while, and I'll say it now in case I forget it then, on the one hand, you'll hear people say, you know, oh yeah, sure, some design. God creates the universe, but the only place where there's life is this little backwater planet that's insignificant in the vast cosmos, and everywhere else it's absolutely detrimental to life. And then you get people like Richard Dawkins saying, yeah, there probably are, you know, advanced beings out there. Oh, which is it? Which is it? Whatever it helps in the particular moment that you're talking about a particular thing. I mean, what are we doing here? So is it true that nobody really believes this stuff in the first world? No, that is laughably false. Of course that's laughably false. Are there nominal people, nominal religious people? Yes, of course there are. But nobody disputes that.
Were created by Bronze Age or Iron Age peasants who didn't even know the Earth orbited the sun. So the wisdom in those books is not wisdom at all.
Okay, now, first of all, for those of you that listen regularly, I provided some clips by Michael Heiser a few episodes back, where Michael Heiser makes the point that, look, it may be that you're misunderstanding the passages in the Old Testament that seem to give you some kind of a cosmology that is out of step with science. But consider the fact that if God wants to communicate to people in an ancient context who know nothing about modern cosmology and physics and quantum mechanics and all these kind of things, that he's trying to communicate to them theological points, why is he going to say, okay, now before we talk about this, I need to explain to you what quarks are, and I need to explain to you, where we're going in the future with science and all these kind of things that people thousands of years from now are going to understand. The person would be sitting there saying, does he not understand who I am? This is completely irrelevant to me. No, God was communicating to people points that were relevant to them and that would be relevant to us that we can clear enough understand today after the fact, and he communicated it to them in a way that they would understand. He's not trying to communicate this sort of cosmology that Krauss is talking about here, or the sort of physics or whatever else, or biology. That wasn't the point. The point was to communicate facts about the world that are important to make the theological points and about creating a nation that would serve him and a people that would serve him. So this reliance that if the Bible isn't a scientific document, or if it doesn't answer all the scientific questions I would like it to answer, well, then it's irrelevant. Secondly, he says it's to Bronze Age peasants. That's a trope that goes around. Someone made a point, one of the Christians made a point in the YouTube channel that I thought was really, really important. Bronze Age peasants. Who does he think, what are peasants? Peasants are the common folks, the working class people, the people that are, just normal citizens doing their job and going home. Is this not the kind of people that Krauss hopes will buy his book? Of course he does. He's speaking to the peasants of our day. And whether they realize it or not, he is insulting them. And peasants are not idiots. Okay, let's keep moving.
And people take the wisdom.
Oh, by the way, notice that the only criticism there is it was an age when they didn't have the level of science that we have. Well, so what? That wasn't the point that was being made. And secondly, that it was a really long time ago. These old books. Well, so what? There's a lot of old stuff that's good. Just because it's old, that's not a relevant criticism. Krauss do better.
In fact, we've actually learned something over the last 20 centuries, and science has taught us how the world works. Now, for science, the interesting thing as a scientist is that God is completely irrelevant to science. Most scientists don't spend enough time thinking about God to even know if they're atheists, because they try and understand how the world works, and God never enters into it. It's just completely irrelevant. And in fact, the more we've learned about the natural world, the more we've learned that you don't need any divine intervention to explain anything.
Really? What an incredible... just like we said on the Christopher Hitchens video, these big bombastic claims from the people that say we should just, appreciate how little we actually do know as we learn more. Well, is this true, this idea that scientists don't really think about God and that God is completely unnecessary to answer these questions that we're trying to get answers to? Well, there are some people like that. Biologist George Gaylord, for example, says about us that we are an eczema on the face of the universe. And we are, quote, the product of a mindless and purposeless natural process which did not give us, did not have us in mind. It didn't have us in mind. But there are others who seem to disagree. What about physicist Freeman Dyson, who writes, as we look out into the universe and identify the many accidents of physics and astronomy that have worked together to our benefit, it almost seems as if the universe must, in some sense, have known we were coming. Or how about Paul Davies, who says, I cannot believe that our existence in this universe is a mere quirk of fate, an accident of history, an incidental blip in the great cosmic drama. Our involvement is too intimate. We are truly meant to be here. What about Roger Penrose speaking about mathematics? He says, it is hard for me to believe that such superb theories could have arisen merely by some random natural selection of ideas, leaving only the good ones as survivors. The good ones are simply much too good to be survivors of ideas that have arisen in a random way. There must be, instead, some deep underlying reason for the accord between mathematics and physics. John Polkinghorne says, quote, science does not explain the mathematical intelligibility of the physical world, for it is part of science founding faith. For it is part of science's founding faith that it is so. We got more. What about Peter Atkins, who believes that space-time generates its own dust in the process of its own self-assembly? Now listen to this atheistic description here. Space-time generates its own dust in the process of its own self-assembly. And he refers to that as a cosmic bootstrap, referring to the self-contradictory idea of a person lifting himself by pulling up on his own bootstraps. But Keith Ward says about this, about Atkins' view, that it's self-contradictory and is logically impossible for a cause to bring about some effect without already being in existence. He says, between the hypothesis of God and the hypothesis of a cosmic bootstrap, there is no competition. We were always right to think that persons or universes who seek to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps are forever doomed to failure. Charles Towns, who won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1964 for his discovery of the maser, the forerunner of the laser, writes, quote, "In my view, the question of origin seems to be left unanswered if we explore it from a scientific point of view. Thus, I believe there is a need for some religious or metaphysical explanation. I believe in the concept of God and in his existence." Arno Penzias, who used the propitious position of the space platform of Earth to make the brilliant discovery of the echo of the beginning, the cosmic background radiation wave, sums up the position as he sees it, quote, "Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with the very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan." Quantum theorist John Polkinghorne rejects the many-universe interpretation, saying, "Let us recognize these speculations for what they are. They are not physics, but in the strictest sense, metaphysics. There is no purely scientific reason to believe in an ensemble of universes. By construction, these other worlds are unknowable by us. A possible explanation of equal intellectual respectability, and to my mind, greater economy and elegance, would be that this one world is the way it is because it is the creation of the will of a creator who purposes that it should be so." Cosmologist Edward Harrison reacts in a similar way, saying, quote, "Here is the cosmological proof of the existence of God, the design argument of Paley updated and refurbished. The fine-tuning of the universe provides prima facie evidence of deistic design. Take your choice, blind chance that requires multitudes of universes or design that requires only one. Many scientists, when they admit their views, incline toward the teleological or design argument." Finally, Arno Penzias again reminds us that the notion that there is a teleological dimension in the universe goes back millennia. He writes, now get this is fantastic to me. "The best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole," end quote. You can get all those quotes and many, many, many more like them in John Lennox's book, God's Undertaker, which is fantastic, and I recommend it to you. So is it true that scientists don't think about God, that this is an irrelevant question, and that God is completely irrelevant to the study of science and completely unnecessary to explain what goes on in the naturalistic universe and the way that it is and where it came from and all those sorts of things? Absolutely not. And even scientists don't think so. So this is what those who listen to me speak regularly on this channel know I refer to as chest thumping. And it has real persuasive power to Christians who are experiencing doubt, or to unbelievers, or people who are looking looking to back up their own opinion with cherry-picked evidence. This sort of thing really does confirm what they want to be true, or it can instill doubt, but it's just mockery. It's just chest thumping. It's just overblown confidence. Let's keep going.
As far as morality is concerned, and the person you want to be, which is really what I think is the heart of what religion, when religion provides many things for people, and we can't deny that. The question is, how can we take the things that people need, community, support, hope, and use the real world to build those quantities? Because religion, if you base your beliefs and your actions on myths that are incorrect, you're inevitably going to take irrational actions. And so what we want to do is what science does, which is force people's beliefs to conform to the evidence of reality rather than the other way around, and not assume the answers to questions before we even ask them.
Okay, well, we're not assuming the answers to questions before we ask them, but I agree with him. If you have wrong beliefs, that can lead to wrong actions in the world. And I think there are religious people with wrong beliefs that lead to wrong actions. All of us can think of examples of that with terrorism and other things. But you understand that goes both ways, right? Like that cuts both ways. Sure, we want to have right beliefs, but we all want to have right beliefs, and we all, of course, believe that wrong beliefs can be dangerous. But that can happen within the realms of science too. If it is, and I know this is something that Christian apologists have said for decades, but they say it because it's true. If you instill young people with the thinking that they are mere animals, and that morality is subjective, whatever Krauss wants to say about morality, fine, whatever. But you can't have objective morality without God as a foundation for that objective morality. And no matter what you have left, it's just subjective. It's just says who. It's your opinion. And I've been saying this a lot lately, but it's true. Objective things are things that we can think of for shorthand as matters of fact, and subjective things are matters of opinion. And it may be the opinion of a large number of people. It may be the opinion of everyone on planet Earth. But it's still just a subjective opinion and not objectively fact if there's no grounding for that morality, because you can always just say, says who? Says who? And we're going to get to see this more in just a few moments. So even though I've mentioned it a lot lately, I need to remind you here that subjectively, what's the best flavor of ice cream? Well, it's a matter of opinion, right? Depends on the subject. Whose morality is correct? Is it okay to smoke marijuana for recreational purposes, or to buy and sell marijuana for recreational purposes or not? Depends where you are and what your community thinks about that. Unless there's an objective foundation for that morality. And guess what? That extends to abuses, that extends to sexual abuse, that extends to genocide, that extends to, of course, racial discrimination, that extends to every evil on planet Earth. It's not really evil if there is no grounding for objective morality. It just becomes a matter of opinion. And so that's very, very important to this discussion, I think.
And use the rational world to build a global society, not an exclusionary society, but a global world where people can live together based on the reality that we're all humans sharing this planet, and we need to work together to build a better place. A morality based on rationality and not outmoded religious beliefs. A famous biologist once said every scientist is an atheist when they go in the laboratory. They don't think anyone is twiddling the knobs. They accept the fact that the evidence of the experiment will tell them what's going on. They don't think that someone's controlling it. So I don't define myself as an atheist. I should first say that. I define myself as an
Wait a minute. Hold on. First of all, so scientists are atheists when they go into the laboratory. This is a bit silly, frankly. Scientists who are doing work in those fields have to assume what is known as methodological naturalism. That means for the purposes of their job, they're not going to presume supernatural forces at work or something like that. That's because that's not what they're trained to deal with. They're trained to deal with, and they're doing an investigation, a naturalistic investigation of the world. So even if they personally believe that God exists and that Jesus rose from the dead and that miracles can happen and that there's a supernatural dimension to reality, they're not presuming that for their work. They're presuming naturalism. They're presuming methodological naturalism. That's opposed to metaphysical naturalism, which has to do with your beliefs and claims about the nature of reality. So, of course, but that's true of any field. If someone is going to do geology, they're going to presume methodological geology. They're going to follow the principles and rules related to geology and things like that. So this idea that everyone's an atheist when they go into the lab, no. Everyone's a methodological naturalist when they go into the lab. That's important distinction. But to reference Lennox's work again, God's Undertaker, interestingly, he says that we live in an ordered universe and that it obeys rational laws. You could just as easily, instead of calling that methodological naturalism, you could call it methodological theism, because you're presuming a very theistic idea that this world is rational and reflects rational thought, and that we can do investigations and that there's order to it all, and those sorts of things, which would hint at a rational mind as the creator. So we could just as easily call it methodological theism. But of course we wouldn't do that, right? Because we're not trying to bug people. We're just trying to, but I'm just saying that can go either way. So are we atheists when we go in the lab? No, these people that do that are just methodological naturalists.
An anti-theist. Namely,
here he says he's not an atheist, he's an anti-theist. We get tagged a lot with this idea that we're just running on wish fulfillment as religious people. We would like it to be true, so that's why we believe it. But here you've got a guy who would like it not to be true. Hitchens said the same thing. He would like it not to be true. He's an anti-theist. So, watch and see. Is there any bias here? Now, I'm not going to hold it against him. That he doesn't think it's true is maybe a separate question from the fact that he would like it not to be true. But those might be related, and there might be a motivation there. And likewise, for some Christians, it may well be that they would like it to be true, and that's a motivation to believe it. But the wish fulfillment thing can be a separate detail. But since these guys are always throwing it at us, when they tell me that we don't want it to be true, we're going to point it out because we hear that a lot.
It would be presumptuous of me to say there's no purpose to the universe because I can't prove that. I can't prove there's no God. I can't say definitively there's no God. What I can say definitively, however, is that I wouldn't want to live in a universe with one. Okay? And the reason for that is that I find that this question of meaning is an interesting question. And if science tells us that there's no objective meaning to the universe, no purpose or meaning, does that make our lives purposeless and meaningless? Absolutely not. Quite the contrary. It means the purpose and meaning in our lives is what we make. It makes what we do more important. It makes the compassion we show up.
Wait a minute. It makes what we do more important? You can't sustain that. It doesn't make it more important than if there was an ultimate purpose given to you by a designer. That doesn't work. But while we're on the subject, let me go over here, because what we have here, we have this physicist giving us a very deeply philosophical concept. And let's see if this is a common thing. Here is cosmologist Neil Degrasse Tyson, and this young boy named Jack is asking Tyson, what is the meaning of life? Let's hear what he has to say.
How old are you? 6 3/4.
Okay. So wait, you have to tell everyone that, because if I repeated it, you'd think I'm lying. Okay, go.
6 3/4.
Cute.
Love those fractions. Yes. Yeah, keep it going. Okay, if you're asking those questions now, you'll be the deepest thinking adult there ever was. So what is the meaning of life? I think people ask that question on the assumption that meaning is something you could look for, and then, I found it. Here's the meaning. Here's what it is. I've been looking for it. Okay? And it doesn't consider the possibility that maybe meaning in life is something that you create.
Now notice, here is what Krauss was just saying, and this is an existential Sartrean atheistic idea that we just decide for ourselves. We make up our own meaning as we go. These guys are not the first to say this. Now, the problem with it is that meaning and purpose, to have any meaning or purpose, they would have to be a meaning or purpose that is ascribed to something or someone, namely an inventor typically. So a shovel doesn't decide to be a shovel. Someone invented shovels and said these are for digging dirt. A hammer is designed, and the idea is that this is for putting nails into boards. The inventor decides the purpose. If hammers and shovels could think for themselves and decide they want to be something else, it would make absolutely no sense. That's not what you are. You're clearly designed for this purpose instead of this arbitrary purpose that you've decided based on your own preferences. And in the same way, human beings, if they have a designer, that designer gets to decide their purpose. If they don't have a designer, there is no purpose. There's just things they like to do. But if there's a designer, they have real meaning and real purpose. I don't go off on this too much. This isn't really something that I harp on a lot, because if an atheist, this is not like an argument that I use, but if an atheist wants to say, well, I can create my purpose for myself, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about one of the theistic arguments for God's existence in a resurrection case and go about this the right way. But since we're responding to him here, that's a way of dealing with this. There is no ultimate. One day, if Hitchens and company are right, then the universe is going to experience a heat death, and there will be no more life, and no one will remember, and there will be there'll be nothing left of the human race, and no one will ever know about it. Now you might say, yeah, but within my lifetime there's meaning. There's purpose for me right now. There's meaning for me right now. But that's just a category error. You don't ascribe your own meaning or your own purpose. It's like the shovel and the hammer again. And precisely for this reason, whenever I talk to my kids about what they want to be when they grow up, I don't tell them what everybody else does. Everybody else tells their kids, including Christian parents, wrongly, you can be whatever you want when you grow up. Now, is that true? Well, it's true in the technical sense that they're able to be a number of things. They're actually not able to be anything they want to be. But they shouldn't be whatever they want to be. If there is a designer, they should seek what was his purpose for my life. Just like the shovel had a designer, and the hammer had a designer, and the computer has designers, and there are purposes ascribed to them by their inventors. Man has an inventor, and each individual man and woman ought to seek out what was the purpose that inventor had for me. And there are overarching purposes like glorifying God and serving Him, but there are specific individual purposes. What does He want for my life? And so with my daughters, I tell them, you can't be whatever you want when you grow up. You be what God wants you to be. But those things are going to be consistent with your motivations and your desires and things like that, if those are good desires that you should have. For example, my daughter said to me when she was very young, because she loved My Little Pony, I want to be a pink pony when I grow up. Now, what am I supposed to say that? Am I supposed to say back to her, you know what, sweetheart, if you just believe hard enough and you try, me and Oprah Winfrey believe that you can be a pink pony when you grow up. It would be senseless. She literally can't be a pink pony. The ontology is all wrong. Moreover, since she's my daughter, I don't think she can in the softer sense, though she could. I don't think if she wants to please God, she can work anywhere that is called the pink pony, if you catch my meaning. So the idea here is that you should be what God wants you to be. Meaning and purpose is something given to you by a designer, and it only has any objective meaning, just like morality. It only has any objective meaning in that sense. If you're ascribing it to yourself, then it is the epitome of subjectivity.
You manufacture for yourself.
Manufacture, exactly right.
And so when I think of meaning in life, I ask, have I learned something today that I didn't know yesterday? Bringing me a little closer to knowing all that can be known in the universe. Just a little closer. However far away all the knowledge sits, I'm a little closer. If I live a day and I don't know a little more that day than the day before, I think I wasted that day. So the people who at the end of the school year say, this summer I don't have to think anymore. I'm thinking, what? To learn is to become closer to nature. And to learn how things work gives you power to influence events. Gives you power to help people who may need it. Power to help yourselves, to shape a trajectory. So when I think of what is the meaning of life, to me, that's not an eternal, unanswerable question. To me, that is in arm's reach of me every day.
Okay, so there he is. Now, what we want to ask Neil Degrasse Tyson is, okay, you've got this subjective morality or subjective meaning and purpose that you created for yourself. It is completely subjective. Perhaps you would agree. There's nothing real about it. There's nothing grounded about it. You've made it for yourself. But you say those people that say, hey, I don't have to go to school anymore. You speak about that as though that's a bad thing. But don't you understand, Neil Degrasse Tyson, that the quest for knowledge may be something that you like. It's the meaning and purpose that you created for yourself, but it may not be the meaning and purpose that someone else created for themselves. And if someone would rather just sit at home and smoke pot all day and be completely unproductive for society, why is that a bad thing? Why is that? Why would it be better, to use a value-based term that atheism cannot account for in any objective sense? Why would that be better for them to decide to learn something every day? Why is it that for anyone besides you who sees things differently than you, why is it a wasted day for them to learn nothing? The only way to say that it is would be to try and speak as though meaning and purpose, the meanings and purposes that you recognize for yourself are also somehow binding or applicable to other people as well. Now, let's say that Neil Degrasse Tyson were to say to us, yeah, I recognize that they're not. I mean, I hate it, but I recognize, I'm just going to grit my teeth and recognize that they're not. Well, that's fine, but I don't think he would live that way. I think he deep down does think everyone should, and he uses terms like should and shouldn't, and good and bad and better and worse. We'll see more of that in just a moment. But I think that deep down he does see that as, in some sense, binding on everyone. Everyone has a certain meaning and purpose that we share, that is objective, that we should want to learn. And I agree with him. The problem is his worldview cannot account for it. He says that this quest for knowledge allows us, and notice, he's inflicting his meaning and purpose. He's begun by telling young Jack that Jack can decide on a meaning and a purpose for his own life. It comes from him. It's not like something that you go out and find. It's within arm's reach. You decide it for yourself. But what if little Jack, and I don't know little Jack, but someone like little Jack wanted to do a genocide? What if they wanted to do something immoral? What if they wanted to inflict self-harm? Well, what if that's the meaning and the purpose that they ascribe to themselves? Would be a monster not to say, no, that is not your meaning and your purpose. But hold on, you just told him that it was, and it's the only thing that makes sense on your worldview, is that he has his own subjective knockoff of objective purpose and meaning. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this? It's not subjective, it's objective, but the Christian worldview can account for real meaning and purpose. Tyson is hitting on something. He's trying to force his meaning and purpose onto Jack. He doesn't say, you can have your own, now go figure out what it is. No. What he says to him is knowledge. It's the quest for knowledge. And whether he outright says it or not, he says in high and exalted terms, this will allow you to shape a trajectory for your life. In other words, accept this meaning because this is the one that matters. As if his meaning and purpose is beyond him. And something that we all share. By the way, a trajectory toward what? Out of what? Is there some good that we're trying to aspire to? He says every day a little bit closer to all world knowledge, which he'll never reach. But why is that a good thing? Because all you can say on naturalistic atheism is, I like it. Okay. Some people like a lot of worse things. Some people like to sell drugs. Some people like, to harm themselves in some way. People like all kinds of things. To just tell people that they can make up their own purpose and their own meaning is not only sloppy and philosophically problematic, but it could also be dangerous. You need to be careful. Be careful with this armchair philosophy, honestly. All right, so let's take a look now back at Krauss. Krauss has just said the same thing, and make up your own meaning, your own purpose. We've now seen the problems with that. You want real meaning and purpose, you need an inventor. They're the ones that can ascribe purpose and design and meaning. All right, let's keep going.
Others, more important. We're not being told what to do by some cosmic Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, in many religions doesn't just condemn you to torture for while you're alive, but for all eternity. You do it because we derive meaning and, in fact, the recognition not from religion that all humans have equal dignity, but from science, that we're all a common species. In fact, that there's nothing sacred, that we create compassion and action, and in fact that humans are no different than other animals in the sense of being evolved species. And we have to realize that we share the earth with them, and in fact those ideas allow us to address what are the real problems of the 21st century. And if we keep going back to this medieval or earlier kind of myths, we won't address that.
Well, they're not myths, they're ontological groundings. So he says there are real problems in the 21st century, no doubt. And I probably agree with him about what many of those problems are, but why are they problems? Why are they bad things? Now, if you think I'm being pedantic and you rolling your eyes at this sort of thing, there's a reason that you've heard Christian thinkers and philosophers say this sort of thing before. It's because it's actually true. You cannot in one breath tell people they get to make up their own meaning and purpose, and that morality is not objective in the sense that theists believe that it is. And then on the other hand, tell them these are the things you should care about. These are the things that everyone should be concerned with. This is your purpose. This is your meaning, because now you're just replacing God with yourself, or dare I say with your interpretation of scientific data. This is a major problem.
In fact, I sort of take umbrage at this sister's remarks, because I don't think anything she said had anything to do with religion. She said understanding dignity, treating people with compassion, and then what people of religion do is they usurp that. They say, if you're not religious, you can't have any of that. But all of those ideas come from a rational view of who we are and how we should relate to others. The best example.
Okay, those ideas. Okay, this is again. I know that he's listened to what Christian philosophers have to say about this. The point is not that you can't do good things and treat people with dignity and help people and be philanthropic without believing in God or without religion. The point is there's no grounding for it. You have no basis for saying that this is an objectively good thing. That's the point. And Krauss doesn't seem to get it any more than Hitchens ever did.
Example of tolerance and across cultures that I can think of is nearby here in Geneva at the Large Hadron Collider. There is a machine that's built by people from 100 different countries speaking a dozen different languages with many different religions and cultures, building these devices that have to work to a millionth of a meter. And it works because science brings people together. Science tells us that we are a common species and we can work together to make the world a better place. And I will close with a quote. I won't sing it, you'll be pleased to know. From Jacob Bronowski, who said, the world is permeated through and through by science. And you can't turn it into a game merely by picking sides. Like it or not, the world is governed by science. The physical.
Okay, hold up. First of all, the Large Hadron Collider, that's fantastic. I love that. When I used to have a Sony account, my screen name was Hadron the Collider. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. And it brings people together. Yeah, that's wonderful. What's the problem? Do I have to be an atheist to appreciate that? I really don't get the point being made here, except that religion divides people and the Large Hadron Collider unites people. Science unites people. Come on, man. Study the history of science and tell me that science has never divided people or that religion has never united people. All you're just talking about is that people can be united under a common goal even if they have different beliefs about the metaphysical nature of reality. Okay. I agree. That's not a point for you. It's not a point for me. It's just a point, right? And I agree with you about it. Okay. Secondly, what was the thing that he just said here? What did he just say?
Physical world, and if we want to deal with our real world, the world is governed by science.
The world is governed by science. I don't even know what that means. What can that even possibly mean? It doesn't make any sense.
The physical world. And if we want to deal with our real
Do you mean nature? Nature would make more sense. I don't know.
Problems, we have to accept what nature is telling us instead of imposing our beliefs on nature. I think if you take the long term.
You hear how he anthropomorphizes nature? We've got to listen to what nature is telling us. Nature is the governing authority in charge. And you guys give Jonathan Pritchett a hard time for speaking about science as though it's a religion. I don't get it.
You have a worse view of societies that have been run by religion in the long term of human history, from the Crusades and back before that. I think that you found that human freedom eventually arose with the enlightenment of knowledge, and in fact, open questioning, which is the hallmark of science. And in fact, if you want to call it a dialogue of faith and reason.
Wait a minute. Now, I want you to know, open questioning is what science does. That's what we've just heard. Now, I want you to hold that in your mind for in a few minutes.
The hallmark of science is that nothing is above question, including God. And the minute we make certain things sacred and not subject to question, we demean ourselves and we stop thinking. I also think
Well, now, hold on a second. Is he aware that there is this whole realm of theology? I work at a seminary. We ask questions about God all the time. It's theology, right? Are you familiar? Seriously. Again, the thing about I think a lot of atheists think that if they were to become religious, there would no longer be any more quest for knowledge. There would no longer be any questions to be asked. We just sit around and just that, well, God did it. This is ridiculous thinking. It's out there in the culture, but I'd love to have a conversation with a person like this. Say, look, do you not realize that we have 2,000 years of church history where some of the greatest minds in history have rallied around this topic? What is God like? Does God exist, and what is he like? And how do we make sense of certain things? And what is God's relationship to that? The questions don't end. There's nothing that can't be questioned. We ask questions, probing questions about all of these things. We believe that our God is pleased with our quest for knowledge.
I have to say, I think we're missing, we're deviating from the point of this discussion. The question isn't is religion important? Because that's an obvious thing. Religion is obviously important.
Great.
So are nuclear weapons. The question is religion outmoded, and are nuclear weapons outmoded? And will the world be a better place without them? And the answer...
No, the question is religion real, and are nuclear weapons real? And the answer in both cases is yes.
Both those is yes. Okay, religion is very important, nuclear weapons are very important, but neither of them in the modern world serve a productive purpose. And so I think that I accept and don't need to debate the question of whether religion is an important part of the way the world is run. The question is, should it be, should it continue to be, and is it decreasing? And in fact, what also hasn't been pointed out is that in most places, in fact happily, monotonically in the first world, the people identifying themselves as religious is decreasing year by year. The first year in England, by the way, as you know from a recent poll, more than half the population finally acknowledged that they didn't have any religious affiliation. In the United States even, it's been decreasing in spite of the efficiency of competition. So I find it...
Actually, let's pull together some of what Krauss said earlier about certain people that don't believe. He says nobody really believes this stuff, but of course they do, right? But let's pull some of that together. What is actually the case? And you can check this out for yourself. It's not that difficult to research the data and find it. But what's actually happening is that in the mainline Christian denominations, the people who were nominal all along, the people that Krauss is talking about who didn't believe and were just kind of going along because they felt like they should go to church, or they just hadn't admitted to themselves that they're just not really believing this stuff. Okay, those people are starting to identify as nuns or as atheists or whatever. But what we're finding is that, and those denominations are dying. That's true. The mainline denominations are dying out and people are leaving those. But where they're going is to non-denominational churches and other churches. And what we see is actually evangelicalism is actually holding its own. And the people that were more serious, that always really did believe, they still really believe. And the people that were just nominal, yeah, they're slipping away. But what you're left with is still an evangelicalism that is holding its own and is actually stronger as a result, because it looks like the newer generations are interested in what is true, not just, I'm just going to do this because my family always did or whatever.
I find it remarkable. So the idea is that science doesn't have any spirituality, which of course is wrong. If you want to get awe and the reason I write books, the reason I talk about science, look at a Hubble Space Telescope picture of the 400 billion galaxies in our universe. Look out and see galaxies 10 billion light years away that may once have had civilizations around them that are living, each of them as 100 billion stars. Look.
Now, hold up. Again, I want to say something about this alien business, based on what he just said. Next time an atheist says to you as a Christian, whoever you are out there listening, oh, you believe that Jesus really rose from the dead because there were all these eyewitnesses and all these kind of things, and well, why don't you believe in aliens? Because after all, there are people that claim that sort of thing. Why don't you point out to them that people like Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins and others, who are the movers and shakers in the atheist community over the past couple of decades at least, they believe in aliens. Or at least they think it's highly likely. Why don't you point that out to them? The only rub I can think, if they grant that, the only rub I think they must have is that, well, is there something in the Bible that says that there aren't any aliens? I don't know where they're getting. We did an episode years ago on what would it mean for Christianity if aliens turned up, if suddenly we found out there was aliens. Nothing, as far as I can tell. Be really interesting. It might prompt some good theological discussions and questions, but I don't think it would do any damage to Christianity. It's weird. It's weird what people poke at. Surely you don't believe in aliens, and yet atheist after atheist believes in aliens.
Look at what we learn about the universe. Look at how atoms work. Those things produce awe and wonder and mystery. The reason I'm a scientist is I love mysteries. And so to pretend that science is just dry and has no spirituality and therefore is somehow less significant than faith is just to misunderstand science and to demean it. And
well, we know that Lawrence, and I don't mean to, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but we know that Lawrence Krauss likes to play with definitions. He admittedly plays with definitions when it comes to things like beginning and what the word nothing means and these kind of things. But what does he mean by spirituality? Do you believe in the spiritual? Do you believe that we are substance dualists that have a physical body and an immaterial spirit or soul? I don't think he does. So if not, then you need to tell me what you mean by. Did you just mean a sense of wonder about the? That's what he must mean. It's the only thing I can make out of this is that he must mean just a sense of wonder and, like he said, mystery and awe about the universe. But spiritual, that's sloppy. What do you mean?
So the point, the discussion we can have is how wonderful and amazing the universe is. And I think we would share in that discussion. But to condemn science as being consumerism, look, I'm an educator. I want to educate people because I want them to learn about how to live a better life and how the world works, and to be able to make their own decisions and to experience more joy. Because the more you understand yourselves and the more you understand nature, I think the more enriching life is. I think that you hit a key point, and I agree with you.
I don't know what I don't know what the other characters on stage have said here, but that he may be reacting to. But like, I don't know that I've ever run into someone who is against science. I really don't know that I have. It's kind of like when people talk about these weird things like snake handling churches. You ever heard of a snake handling church? There was a reality show where they had a couple of them for a little bit. These snake handling churches, where they believe that based on a misunderstanding of the ending of Mark, they think that they can hold these snakes and the snakes won't bite. They'll be perfectly safe, and these guys end up dead. But the point about it, it's not funny. But the point about it is, I hear about that being all over the American South. These snake handling churches. My family comes from the Appalachian Mountains region. My family, both sides, comes from Cookeville, Tennessee, which is West Tennessee. And I've been all over that area, pastored in a place called McMinnville, Tennessee, which is also rural Tennessee, not too far. I couldn't take you to a snake handling church. I can't tell you where one is. I've never been to one. I've never seen one. If I didn't know better, I would just say they were like an urban legend, but I know they do exist or have existed or something. But I don't know anything about that. In the same way, it makes me think, like, who are these people that you're fighting against? These fictitious boxers that you're sparring with that think that science is a bad thing. I've never met anyone like that. Even, oh, by the way, when Jonathan Pritchett, my co-host, says it, it's tongue in cheek. Okay, some of you are thinking, well, you're co-host. It's tongue in cheek. All right, that's not the point. You love science too. He just likes to get you guys riled up. But I've never met anyone who actually believes science is a bad thing.
You completely that you can't condemn a whole population because of some individual. Okay, but the difference is that there are no rule makers in science. There are no authorities. That's the hallmark of science. There's no such thing as a scientific authority. There are scientific experts. But the lowliest student can in fact disprove any. There's no chief scientist. There may be a chief rabbi. There may be a pope. But there's no chief scientist. We say, oh, what's the answer? How should we behave? That's the key facet of science that makes it so wonderful, is that there are no authorities. Now, of course, scientists, although many people wouldn't realize this, are actually people. And therefore, they have all the same foibles as anyone else, and they're scientists who abuse their science as well as every other aspect of their life. But the key aspect is there are no rule makers.
Let me go back. I feel like this woman sitting next to him looks. That's how I feel listening to that. Okay, so this is one of the chief things I want to talk about here. Is it true that there are no authorities in science? Well, clearly not. First of all, the government has some say in a lot of what goes on in science in our nation. All right, you can't carry out certain experiments, you can't do certain things, you can't get certain funding. The government certainly has some level of involvement. But then on top of that, even if you're right, there are gatekeepers. What about the people that control the publications? Those people are very much gatekeepers, and in that sense, they're authorities. And so you have the people that handle the peer-reviewed journal articles and things like that. But then on top of that, you also have a culture And the culture itself serves as an authority. If you want to understand cultures, I don't just mean culture in the soft sense. Cultures are very real things. They have structure to them. They have a history that has created to some degree the fabric of the reality of the culture. They have artifacts and they have legends within the cultures. So things like this. Even the culture of businesses have these things. And so it results in unwritten rules and codes of conduct that everyone just kind of understands. And newcomers to the culture have to get integrated into that and have to figure that out before they're going to be successful. And the culture itself can serve as a sort of authority. If you really want a good book on this, I would recommend Edgar Sheehan's Organizational Culture and Leadership. I think it's in its 5th edition, and anyone getting a business degree needs to read Edgar Sheehan's Organizational Culture and Leadership. It's just fantastic, and it explains all of this and the cultures, the microcultures that develop within organizations and institutions, like scientific institutions, like the community of science itself. But then beyond that, I just finished a great book called To Change the World by James Davison Hunter. It's an Oxford published book that I think would really behoove you to read this, because it talks about how is it that cultures change. And the thing is, they're very difficult to change. And most people, including the religious right, has often made this mistake of thinking that you can change the culture most of the time by changing individual hearts and minds. That if we change enough individual hearts and minds, then somehow that will change the culture itself. Unfortunately, and counterintuitively, it doesn't work that way. Typically, it's not from the bottom up, it's from the top down. Think about this, for example. You hear the preachers say things like that, and we certainly should be involved in evangelism. That's what I live for, reaching people. But we should be reaching people because we care about people. And perhaps one day that could change the culture in general. But you hear those preachers preach that way, that we can change America by reaching these individuals. And I don't say it's impossible. But here's the thing. Those same preachers would point out that abortion is now legal in some sense almost everywhere in the United States, and yet the majority of Americans don't agree with it. How's that? A very small percentage of the population, it's certainly a minority of the population, is same-sex attracted, but yet it has affected our laws and our entertainment world and our everything, right? And we're not here to talk about that, but I'm just saying, Krauss himself talks about how so many, like 40% or more or something, I don't know what the number is, of Americans don't believe in evolution, but yet it's taught in all the classrooms. How is that possible? If it's about changing the hearts and minds and get the majority of the hearts and minds on your side, and then it changes the fabric of the culture, then if the bottom-up approach works, then we would expect those things to change, but it doesn't really happen like that. The culture changes very difficultly and not without a fight, and it's top down. And it's not even the people that are in the center of leadership that change the culture, but people that are close to the center on the periphery. And so there's all this stuff that goes into it. But the point that we want to make is science has a culture. It has its own unwritten rules. It has its own gatekeepers and all of those things. And so the individuals that make up that culture may not serve as authorities, although some of them almost certainly do in some sense. The culture itself serves as an authority. It's for that reason that you have people like Stephen Meyer who are on the outs, whose scientific chops cannot be questioned, but yet he would be ostracized in certain circles because he broke the unwritten rules as it relates to intelligent design or whatever, right? So yes, they very much are authorities, and that's why I feel like that woman looks right now. But let's keep going.
Scientists would say that why is ultimately a stupid question. It doesn't. I mean, I think anyone here who's a parent knows that, if you have a child, the ultimate answer to why is go to bed. And I think that what he's hitting at is when you ask the question why. He says this in other places. When you ask the question why, usually what you really mean is how, right? Okay, but here's the thing. I want to know why. Because remember, the meaning and purpose questions. Those are why questions. Why am I here? Why am I the way I am? Why is the universe life permitting? What am I supposed to do in this universe?
But he says that these are reducible to how questions. No, that's you trying to still find a way to explain everything with science. But remember, this is the guy. Remember how I told you a moment ago to put a pin in the question of whether all the questions are open with science. We're able to question everything. It's these religious people who want to put an end to questions and just say God did it. Well, we showed that that's not what religious people are interested in. We question everything related to the nature of God as well. However, it's the scientist before us here today who is saying to us that we have to stop at the why question. Don't go there. Don't ask those questions. Just stick with the how questions. Don't ask the why questions. Those can't be answered anyway. Why can't they be answered? Well, it's not the purview of science. Therefore, they can't be answered. Is what I'm basically getting here. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Well, that's okay. That's interesting that you think that way. But scientists, that sort of scientism, that the only useful knowledge is what can be brought to us by science, can't even sustain itself. It's what we call a self-referentially incoherent statement. The statement itself can't be scientifically demonstrated. Everything, the only things that are important are the only things that we can know are the things that we can know because of science. Okay, that statement can't be known according to science, right? So this thinking goes just right down the toilet.
Whenever we say why, we really mean how. And so we can understand how the universe works, but why do we need to ask the question why? It may have no fundamental meaning. And so I don't think science presumes to answer that question. And if religion presumes to answer that question, I think inevitably it's proved itself not being able to do that. In terms of the tree of knowledge and the speaker in the back who let's not talk about the God particle because it's not. But why, and you said it yourself, why do we have to spend so much time interpreting the Bible? What is special about that book that is different than anything else?
Special.
I mean, that's the point. We should not waste our time trying to interpret what people who didn't even know there were dinosaurs or the Earth orbited the sun or that evolution happened. Why should we try and interpret those ignorant beliefs in a modern world where we actually understand things?
Okay, well, so here's the thing. Again, we are interested in what the Bible has to say because it turns out that there is a God and that God raised Jesus from the dead. And we discover that through philosophical argumentation, some scientific inferences that we make based on science, and historical analysis of the events surrounding the resurrection. So if God exists and God raised Jesus from the dead, and principally this book is the one that gave us that, and purports to give us more information related to those affairs, and then that means that this book is seemingly very important because it seems to be the message of that God and that Jesus, right? So you're going about it backwards. Also, it's as though he thinks that the Bible is this book is supposed to be some kind of a thoroughly scientific textbook, when that's not the point of the Bible. That's not what the Bible is here to be for us. That's not to say that there's not some overlap or things that are important, but that's not the point of it. Why does he think, what is the threat here that he's concerned about? It's as if he thinks that people are just going to keep looking to the Bible for scientific answers to things, and that somehow it's going to impede science, the scientific disciplines. I don't get it. We don't go to the Bible just to find out. It's not like when we're sitting around in the lab. It's not like we're sitting around in a lab trying to understand chemistry. And, well, what does the Bible say about chemistry? Let me go see if I can figure that out. And then go back to, we're trying to figure out, geology. Well, let me look at the Bible and see what it says. That's not how it works. We do that stuff in the lab. If the Bible has something interesting to say, great. But the point of going to the Bible is to understand and know God better and what he wants for humanity. That's the point.
What scientists hope for and what science does for us, and what I hope every student and every person experiences once in their life, is to have something they deeply believe in that's at the heart of their being, that without it they wouldn't feel they were human, proved to be wrong. It happens to me every day as a scientist, and that opens your mind. And so the point is that I'm ready to change my views the minute nature tells me that. And if we all were willing to change our minds when we were proved wrong, the world would be a better place. But there is a simpler answer, and the answer is we're descended from a common ancestor. We're not descended from modern apes. We have a common ancestor, and it's not as I said, it's like Bernowski's thing. It's not a question of choosing to believe. It's like choosing to believe if I walk out the 10th floor of a window that I can walk. We are descended from a common ancestor. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the point is that belief is, I don't believe in anything. I asked the question, how did...
I'd like to know what his understanding of the word belief is. Clearly you believe that that chair would hold you when you sat down. I doubt that he got down and took the chair apart to see if it would hold. And he sat down in the chair. Of course, he believes things. What do you mean you don't believe anything? He just said a moment ago that he wished people would have something they're really passionate about, they believe in, challenged. And he said, I would change my views. What does he mean? I'd change my beliefs. It's just trying to get away from any language at all that has any religious connotations or ever has.
How did we arise here? And in fact, what's remarkable is that I've discovered that from studying science that in fact humans evolved from earlier species of animals, and that life originated as chemistry turned into biology, and then in fact the whole universe can arise from nothing. I just wrote a book about it without any divine intervention. So all I can say
No. That is a definite overstatement. You can watch other videos of Krauss, and he talks about what he means by the universe coming into existence from nothing. And what he means is he has to redefine nothing. Nothing is, philosophically, when we're talking about nothing, we're talking about not anything. We're not talking, what he's talking about is you've already got space and time and a roiling sea of balanced positive and negative energy. You got a lot of stuff there, right? That's not nothing. That's something. There are potentialities, powers, possibilities, properties there. Stuff can happen. But, and so that's as good as he can do. So he's like, look, we can do this. So that's a universe from nothing. No, that's not a universe from nothing. A nothing would be a universe from not anything. And not anything has, some people say what rocks dream about or something. That's nothing. So that there are no powers, no possibilities, no properties, no potentialities. Nothing can happen. You have to have a cause. This is terminological acrobatics.
I don't see any evidence of God. I don't see any evidence that there's a teapot orbiting Jupiter. I can't prove that there isn't. But since I don't see any evidence for God in any of my studies of science, the question is irrelevant.
Okay, great. Well, so here's the thing. Again, this is a man who knows the difference, but seems to regularly confuse methodological naturalism with metaphysical naturalism. When he says, well, everybody's an atheist when they go into the lab. Right, that's methodological naturalism. Christian scientists can presume methodological naturalism when they go into the lab because that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. I liked how Blake Genta once put it, that I hope I understood him correctly or can describe it correctly, but he said, someone who doesn't even believe that the Bible is inerrant or without error, without contradiction, could presume methodological inerrancy and sit down and say, all right, I'm going to, as an experiment, see how I could square the claims of the Bible so that they're not contradictory and not in error, that just to see what the strongest possible reading of this might be. The person might not believe in inerrancy, but they could do work in that area and presume something like methodological inerrancy. And in the same way, there are many Christians who are scientists who presume methodological naturalism when they go into the lab, but that doesn't mean that they are metaphysical naturalists. It doesn't mean they actually believe naturalism is true. And we've just seen again and again and again, he said, well, we don't need God to answer this question or that question. Well, of course, in the lab, you're not supposed to presume God is the answer to these things. The problem that he has is, and the reason for this confusion is he's bumping up against this question when he's trying to figure out cosmology. And so the best he can do is just to say, well, I can't really get something from nothing. So we'll call this something that is very much something. We'll label that nothing and then show how the universe could arise from that. Doesn't work. So anyway, this is Lawrence Krauss. Hope you've enjoyed this. I'll tell you, here I am, and I realize that for some of you out there that disagree with me, who are atheists, you think, well, you probably just don't understand these guys. Listen, I've been studying this stuff for 15 years or something. I've listened to all of these guys for years, and from the highest-minded atheist voices out there are problems. And it's not necessarily, the problems come, it's not that they're not good within their field. It's that Lawrence Krauss, who may be some kind of a, revered name in your household, when he starts talking about philosophy or something, it's then up for grabs. He's not doing science anymore. Okay. When Richard Dawkins, same thing. A lot of these guys can't cut it when they get into that arena. And that's the arena they have to come into, is philosophy of religion, to start talking about these things, or historiography with the resurrection or something. And they're going to, and I say this gently and lovingly, they're going to bungle it there, because they're out of their depth. And when it comes to the YouTube atheists, this is 21. If we count Neil deGrasse Tyson, that's 22 atheists, celebrity atheists or YouTube atheists that I've dealt with in this series. Most of the time, it's just mockery, just pure mockery. When they address the arguments, they make common mistakes related to how the argument is framed, like voicing what is supposed to be an equivocation fallacy with the Kalam cosmological argument or something like that. It's stuff that's been talked about, at the academic level for decades, right? But most of it is just mockery. And so I have to say, at atheist number 22 today, I am still emphatically a Christian, and I don't even think I'm the best we've got, but I have found most of the criticisms trivially easy to answer. And so I encourage you, if you're an atheist, go outside today, take a deep breath, look around you, look at your hands, look in the mirror at your incredibly complex frame, and ask yourself the question, seriously, am I going to believe there's not a creator? Just ask yourself honestly and be open to it. I'll tell you what, I'll do the same. I'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.